I saw a comment somewhere this week that described the Lance government as a never ending skit from this hour has 22 minutes. It neatly sums up what a growing number of Islanders think of this administration. Since Dennis King left 14 months ago, it's lurched from confusion to crisis and back again. And now, Gilles has sucked all the air out of the room as the Premier tries to paint a $100,000 donation as a well-intentioned gesture gone wrong by the now former cabinet minister and member of the PC caucus. This is a mind-bending spin. The facts tell a different story, and today Stephen Myers and I will dig into a crisis that threatens to completely derail a government already off course. It's Myers and MacNeill, Because Life is Local, Episode 2. Let's get cracking. Stephen Myers, welcome. What's your take on this whole Arsenault crisis?
Yeah, well, it's kind of a weird one. I think that obviously the government doesn't want these types of things to happen, so it's not good on that front. It's been kind of strange to watch because the timeline is only becoming more clear to me probably after question period yesterday, on how long the Premier knew and when he made the decision to make changes. Overall, I probably think that the Premier did the best he could do with the situation, but I mean, I'm sure your opinion differs.
Well, my opinion does differ because I think the facts tell quite a different story. When I was the first reporter to call the Premier's office, and those calls happened on Thursday and Friday. And the Premier's office, despite what the Premier says now about being open and honest and transparent, the Premier's office would not acknowledge that the file was referred to the RCMP. They knew that it was referred to the RCMP. They would not acknowledge what the Premier knew or when he knew it. They wouldn't answer a direct question. And then sort of after a couple or three of these conversations, then the offer was made. Well, there's this report. Premier's office said they didn't know anything about it, but then suddenly they know about a report. And that was forwarded to me on Friday evening. So I don't think the Premier has done the best he could because, frankly, I don't think he's been fully candid with Islanders on this. But you've been an MLA and a cabinet minister, obviously, in the same department. What strikes you about the allegation here?
Well, there's a number of things. One, I mean, never meet with somebody without having staff with you, particularly when it's a regulatory process. So I spent a lot of time in the regulatory part because I was in environment. So would never go anywhere without at least my deputy, who would always be the one to have to execute any agreements that I would make anyways. And the other thing is never firmly agree. And I was involved in this golf course file. I was the original minister who gave them approval to work in the water course. But what I said when I met with them and my deputy was with me was, we'll do what we can to help this along. We'll take it back to staff and see what they say. And that's exactly what we did. And it was a long process that happened from there that only involved staff, no longer involved me. And they worked out an arrangement with the developer. And when I signed off on it, I really had no input in it, nor did I want to, other than I wanted them to try to work and carry this along because I felt like there was a positive enough benefit from doing the work. So
we can get into the importance of wetland a bit later and why compensation matters, because I think that's actually an important conversation to have.
Yeah.
But in this case, and in Mary Murphy's report, the payment made by the developer was $406,500.
Yeah.
Potentially could have been $1 million.
It could have been.
So how often are developments in this province allowed to move forward in wetlands without paying whatever the maximum number may have been? Was this an exception, or is this a common thing?
They're not common. Like, these things don't come across commonly anyways. Rarely would you see people trying to work in wetlands, or in some cases they're very small portions where it's just at the edge of. This is a massive one because it's a golf course, so it's a kind of a different beast than somebody trying to build a cottage, and a fifth of an acre of their 5 acres is a wetland, and they're trying to deal with it. So probably none of this is in the norm, but the act is spelled out that there's a place for the minister to be involved, but not the way that minister was involved.
So how was the $406,500 created? Where did that number come from?
It was just an agreement between the parties that that's what they were willing to pay. And
that's a per acre charge.
yeah.
Okay. Okay.
And then it just comes into the department, and the department administers it to repair other wetland or to create ponds or ducks unlimited type work in different parts of the province that they may already be working on or may already be in their plans. So it's a fund that's used to help protect other areas.
So just for full disclosure for our listeners, were you still minister when the $406,500 was determined? You were certainly minister leading up to the agreement.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if I was still there when it was executed or not. I know that I was involved in the discussion, and we agreed to try to work with them to the best of our ability. Developers generally wouldn't want to pay anything, so I think there's probably a back and forth that would happen, but I can't say that I was or can't say I wasn't. I'm not 100% sure if I was the one that signed off on it or not. It was certainly a file that I brought forward.
It's this strikes me as such an old school island political story. I mean, and I had sort of hoped that this type of dealing was not part of how we do business today, but clearly what's disconcerting is you have a minister of the crown basically going rogue, meeting with the developer in a hotel in Summerside, where the idea, the notion of a payment, a community donation, is raised, and the minister has, I've got a spot for you. That just sort of stinks to high heaven, because the minister had already given verbal approval to the developer that he would get his amendment and he wouldn't be charged any extra money. How do you explain that, Stephen?
Well, I don't think that's up for me to explain.
No,
for sure.
but you were a member of this government.
Yeah.
You certainly know how government operates.
Yeah.
Is there any justification that you've seen after 14 years in the legislature that would justify, explain, or rationalize what Gilles Arsenault did?
I don't think it's normal, for sure. I think that this is the kind of stuff that government doesn't want to get involved in. This is there's lots of funds. I mean, if you're the Minister of Environment and it's an environmental organization, there's lots of ways you can get money through natural means to an organization to either operate or do work or do projects. I mean, there's lots of different funds that have been created in there. Like there's a net zero fund, there's different challenge funds that exist that you could get money. So I think that no, I can see wanting to help your district for sure, but I think that you use the funds that are readily available and put through the process of the bureaucratic arm of it so that it comes out at least legal.
Gilles Arsenault never told his department.
I know.
He never told his department about $100,000 donation.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's either,
I'm not defending him for sure.
If Gilles Arsenault says, I did nothing wrong, I don't believe I did anything wrong, it wasn't my intention to break the rules.
Yeah.
He's either the most incompetent politician and minister who doesn't know anything about ethics, what's right or wrong, or the rule book in his own department, or what he created was something intended to deceive. Is that a fair assessment?
I don't know if it's a fair assessment or not. I think if you go back to the whole timeline of it, here's the thing. So the RCP had the file, and so does the Conflict of Interest Commissioner. What happens if they come back with something, or what happens if they come back with nothing? So let's go that angle. What happens if they come back with nothing? On the 13th of March, the Premier knew, according to you, didn't do anything for 2 weeks, had it on a Friday night and gave it to you on a Friday night, didn't do anything until Saturday, and then came back on Sunday and finished the job. Then, I don't know if you watched Question Period this week, but on Tuesday in Question Period, buried Gilles again, which rightly or wrongly. But so what happens if both of the entities that are investigating this now say there was nothing not necessarily out of the ordinary, but there was nothing criminal or there was no benefit gained, which will be the two things that will be investigated here. And the Premier's basically buried him. What happens? What happens now? Like, does Gilles have a career?
Look, I don't think he should be a member of the legislature right now. To be honest, I know he's saying that he has the support of his riding. I don't know how you judge that. He must be judging it by a few comments on Facebook. Um, I think the premier really has a lot to answer for. Do you remember a file being sent to the RCMP on the actions of a cabinet minister?
I don't know.
It's
I
pretty
don't.
rare, right?
I,
So I think what we've seen from Rob Lance is an attempt to diminish the credibility of the referral to the RCMP by saying he wants to bring in an investigator to find all the facts. Well, the Deputy Minister of Justice, that's their job, to know what smells rotten and what doesn't. And for the first time, at least in my memory, the actions of a minister are being referred to the RCMP. And our premier decided not to tell us. He decided instead to hire a Tory lawyer to quote unquote investigate. But if you read Murphy's report, he's pretty selective on stuff. He's soft on stuff, and he omits stuff. I think now in hindsight, it was a report created for government spin as much as anything else.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, obviously, I have no intimate knowledge other than everything that I've got from you off your story on Sunday and the document. So I did read the Murphy report, knowing that it's gone to the RCMP on the 13th of March is probably enough to pause your relationship to cabinet and caucus. Like, it probably, if that's the case, that probably should have happened right at that point. But on the flip side of it, I kind of feel like maybe different from you that the premier handled it not too bad this week. Like, I get it, it's wrong, and I get it, it's a mess. But his answers that he's provided to date, and he's calling transparency, you're saying it's not, but at least sometimes in politics, when all the parts of the story is out, it's easier to get the story under control. Versus, I'll give you the example back when in e-gaming, and we couldn't have trickled it out, and the government wouldn't say anything, so we trickled more.
Another story the graphic book broke, by the way.
Another story the graphic book. But when you trickle it out, there's more bleed. Then I don't think for a second the Liberals didn't have all this information too. So it was either he told all the story or he got bled out.
But that's not actually what he did. He first responded on Saturday. He knew I had the report Friday. So Saturday was predictable based on what he had given to me. His staff had sort of reluctantly given me the night before. They knew I was going to come out with something. That's when he brought in the Conflict of Interest Commissioner. He didn't ask the Conflict of Interest Commissioner to examine it 2 weeks earlier. I think he brought in the Conflict of Interest Commissioner to diminish the referral to the RCMP in the public's mind. And if you look at how he talked about it at his press conference Monday, that was the first time he mentioned the RCMP. Right. And it was almost as an afterthought with no detail at all. And I think Rob Lance wants credit for things that he actually hasn't done, which is deliver real leadership on this in a timely way. If I'm a member of the Conservative caucus or government, I got to be concerned with an office that continually responds and is reactive than trying to figure out, okay, this is a big friggin' mess. What's the best way to your point earlier, get it under control, try to minimize the damage as much as possible, and get on to the stuff we really want to be talking about.
Yeah, I can only speak for me. I'm not going to speak for how the premier decides to do this because I have no idea. But on March 13th, I would have had crisis communications on the ground then, doing whatever to try to figure out how to navigate these parts of it. And I think that I don't know that didn't happen. Clearly, a crisis communicator wouldn't say wait 2 weeks. A crisis communicator would say go now.
It seems to me that at every point that the primary objective of the Premier's office has been to try to deflect, minimize, or not be accountable, not release information.
Yeah, and I guess I think they probably did release the information. I think I'm kind of stuck on the March 13th thing. So like, had that all,
We still don't have a final copy of the Murphy report.
I noticed that yesterday in question period.
I noticed that too.
So I didn't realize that was even the case. Can I switch to that just for a second though?
Sure.
So like, I watched the question periods the last 2 days to kind of see what the theme is, aside from the fact that this is probably the juiciest story that you have for the Tories since they've been in government. I feel like finally the Liberals have picked a topic and stayed on it. Like, I mean, I talked about e-gaming earlier. We just did e-gaming over and over and over again. I guess you socialize it to the public as this is the story, this is the main story. And like most people don't know what happened in e-gaming, but they know it was a scandal because we talked about it so much. So it was the first time that the Liberals moved between question askers and stayed on the same topic since they've jumped around all over the place. And maybe it's credit to Ronnie McPhee, who's running the shop in there now for them. I'm gonna give Ronnie.
Or maybe it's because
credit.
the boss is sitting outside the rails and every Islander gets to see him. Is that a mistake, by the way?
Yes. I don't know why he would ever spend any time there. Like, go shake hands and like you were wasting your time standing behind the rail. Notwithstanding, there's a scandal going on. You took PNP, one of the bigger scandals on PEI. Like, disappear. Like, I can't stress enough. Robert Mitchell seems to be not navigating the role that he has as leader well enough. Like, he has a real opportunity here. Get out of the legislature and get out of the negativity. I'm going to say that every week until he stops.
How would you rank Hal Perry and Matt McFarland since they're the primary questioners?
I thought Hal was good. I mean,
he was understated, eh? Like he wasn't throwing tantrums or arms in the air or anything like that.
He was very clear and articulate. I'll give him credit. And I mean, Matt McFarland's case, he's probably always good. Like, 'cause he's a lawyer and he's quite bright and he's articulate. I know that you guys all hate theatrics, but theatrics kind of, there has to be some sort of lure too. Like, there has to be some amount of charisma, and probably Matt doesn't have that, but he's got all the other tools. Like, he's super smart and he knows his file. I thought his questions were really good. I thought his question about the Sidney McEwen case was good. Like, how do you help one cabinet minister break the law and kick another one out for doing it? It's a great question. If I was in opposition, would pound the guts out of that over and over and over again and say, you're both breaking the law and saying you're settling breaking the law. I know that I'm a big, Sidney McEwen is one of my dearest friends. He's one of the very few people on earth I would ever trust to give me advice, even though I didn't always take it at my own peril. But I love Sidney, and he absolutely needs to be in cabinet to help this government ferry along, because he is one of the smartest political people they have, but doesn't discount the fact that the premier willfully broke the law in that case.
That's actually an interesting, just a political, how do you navigate it? That would broaden the Gilles Arsenault story onto every wharf with PEI. They would be listening. That's a good idea. Free advice. We know if they bring it up next week in that frame that...
I'm going to start charging them. If they take my ideas, I'm going to start sending them bills.
Sydney could be out of cabinet in 2 weeks.
I hope not, because the island really needs Sydney. So I'll be very, very clear. I think probably you and I both agree on that. Like, I hope not, because the PEI needs Sidney McEwen really badly right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's something that needs to be fixed. I just use that as an analogy because it is quite simple. Like, weeks ago you were defending breaking the law, and now you're not. So you got to be careful when you stand on your pulpit that, you know, the mess you have behind you isn't equal.
On the Murray Murphy report, what was the intent there?
I really don't know. Like, Murray's a friend of mine too. So
But what information would the premier need after something's referred to the RCMP? Because last time I checked, investigation is what the RCMP does. And they would do it better, frankly, than a charlatan lawyer who does a lot of work for government.
Yeah, I don't know. I've used outside legal advice for different things. Remember the gate that was across Spotton Island there in 2019?
Yep.
I got legal advice from, it wasn't Murray, but another lawyer. And I said, what avenue do I have to fix this and make it iron tight, because I want the gate gone? And it took them a few days, and they came back with a good piece of advice, and we executed it. So sometimes, like, sheer how does the law work and how can we make sure that we stay inside it, I would use it for.
But that's not what this was.
No, it wasn't. It was an investigation. It was
No, it wasn't.
Well, it is what it is.
An
What
investigation would have asked Gilles Arsenault, why didn't you tell your department for a month about $100,000 quote unquote donation?
Yeah, I guess if I would take it at face value when he says he didn't think it was a big deal, probably he didn't. I don't know. Like, he probably didn't think it was a big deal.
In your time as minister, did you ever hear of this committee from Evangeline?
No, but I mean, there'd be thousands of these across the island that I wouldn't know about either. Like, you know, I worked with Watershed a little bit. Even with them, we just met with the top level Watershed group for the most part.
How common is it for an organization in government to get more than they requested in a government application for funding?
I've never seen it. You'd be lucky if you can get them anything half the time.
So I've said publicly that I think we should be investigating the $24,000 that the committee received last year, because the ask was for $15,000. And then the minister at some point in time spoke highly of this organization as one that he wants to support, which is a minister's prerogative.
Right.
But the challenge we have right now, and I'm not going to get into supposition or specific rumors, but last year was the craziest year in my memory of provincial politics. It was an election campaign all year.
Yeah.
And you know as well as I do what some people are thinking.
Yeah, look, I don't know who would investigate it if the RCMP makes it part of their investigation or the Auditor General. There's nobody else really who can.
But somebody's got to go in and do sort of a bit of a forensic audit on.
I'm sure this is on
both those funds.
Auditor's radar. I can't imagine that it's not. Like I said last week, he does 7 reports a year. Surely he'll fit this one in.
I mean, if you just look at the last 14 months, it's been a roller coaster, and it's been almost entirely driven by self-inflicted wounds from the PC party and Rob Lance. I mean, the premier, obviously, he's dealing with the fallout of Gilles. I think it's been a fairly big failure in the fallout. But if Gilles Arsenault had been doing his job, there wouldn't have been an issue. So how do you right the ship? And is it even possible?
Yeah, I don't know. I think there's probably polling going out in the field here for April for this quarter. If the narrative ever releases it public again so the public could see it, we'd have a better idea. Nobody's doing. Maybe you and I should get some money together and do our own poll. We can release it on our podcast. I mean, there's value in knowing where people are today in their thoughts, period. But I know government probably has internals. But I'll ask you this. Do you think that this is an issue that's going to last in the legislature until the end of May when the budget's on? Do you think the Liberals and Greens can stretch this out to be an issue for that period?
I think they can sporadically stretch it out, for sure, just to keep it in the back of every Islander's mind. If they continue on this when the budget comes down, then their eyes off the ball, right? I mean, because by every indicator, this budget is going to include some cuts. I mean, I'm hearing some funding flat lines at institutions like post-secondary. That would be a surprise, but there are going to be cuts. There's going to be expenditures that government prioritizes that will be questionable. There's going to be expenditures that they should be making that they probably aren't. So I think that the opposition is going to have to pivot. But this is just, if you're building a foundation and you're building towards an election, and you want people to think that the Conservatives can't shoot straight, this is just another big bullet.
No, I don't disagree. I think the issue is, and the media falls into it, and politicians sometimes fall into it, is that they forget that cycles are extremely short now. Like, we're in the TikTok era where people just get fed and fed and fed something new all the time. So they're always looking for something new. So how do you keep this to be something new? And I'll give you an example. So I found out about this Saturday morning. Well, this is the biggest issue to hit PI politics in maybe my lifetime. It was what I thought Saturday morning. And I think I reached out to you maybe Saturday evening, and you said you were writing a story Sunday. More stuff happened, and I thought, I even said to some of my friends, I said, I don't know if Rob Lance is going to be able to survive this. Monday came, and it was like the third day of the story. By the end of the day Monday, my whole Facebook was full of people furious about a hamburger not being allowed in Burger Lovin'. No, I'm not joking. It's true. They were furious. They were furious about that. By Wednesday morning, so yesterday morning, my Facebook was full of people who were furious the government was taking away the common zone in the Colville Manor, that was going to exist anymore. By last night, Robin had it fixed, to his credit. He had a Facebook post out, and that's the story today. So, like, how do you feed what could be a very, very big issue when there's so many other things that people chase? And it's not a fault of the media or the politicians. It's just the way public is.
It's the challenge that the PC party is not a unified party right now. And Rob Lance has not really done anything to build unity. And there's a lot of chatter within the Tory ranks. The Premier is really setting himself up for a big failure, potentially. Now, I still, when I say big failure, that doesn't mean that I don't think the Tories could win the next election, just the way the earth seems to be evolving right now. But Lance isn't making it easy.
I said it last week. I'll say it again this week. He has work to do in the Tory party. I wasn't at the AGM this weekend. I won't be back to any AGM in the future, but my understanding lots weren't.
One of the things that sort of, it's predictable, but it's unfortunate, is the Premier has basically thrown the Deputy Minister of Environment and the Deputy Minister of Justice under the bus on this.
Right.
And they both did their job. And kudos to the Department of Environment, because they pushed back. When Jill said, I've approved it, no compensation, nothing was ever formalized, the department, from the deputy and the people inside the department, pushed back against it. That's courageous.
Yeah, those are two gentlemen who I think are very good at their jobs. Like, Norbert is great at his job. Joan is great at his job. I think that there's credit to them for doing the right thing. So clear that they did the right thing. And I think that they deserve kudos for doing that. But I think that I would say inside both of those departments is full of people who have regulatory regimes to deal with that only do the right things all the time. So I think that none of this should land on the shoulders of the departments, because the departments follow the regulation to the letter of law all the time in both of those cases.
By the way, do you think Gilles Arsenault should quit?
I think he probably would have made it easier on everybody had he included himself. The Premier, as I noted earlier, is in this weird quagmire that if it all comes back that really nothing was that out of line other than what we know and have a distaste for now, like, does he bring him back into caucus? Is there an opportunity for him to be in cabinet again?
If there are no charges, which is possible, and no conflict, which seems, given some of the connections between the PC party and that committee, there seems to be a conflict there. But let the Conflict of Interest Commissioner do their work. He's still, at best, woefully incompetent on knowing what the rules are for how a minister should operate. He has no political antenna for what's right and wrong. And he's dismissive of the bureaucracy and the deputies that are there to oversee departments, because he ignored his own.
Well, I think there's competing stories in the storyline of the developers and the storyline of Gilles. So I think that's probably where the meat of the story is. Like,
well, are you talking about whether the developers expect it?
Yeah.
Well, the problem is Murray Murphy's report. There's a line in there that says the timing of the donation makes it tied to approval.
Right.
So basically, Murray Murphy has agreed with the developer, and Graham Cook he's a respected guy, right?
And they work in this regulatory mess everywhere. So anywhere you build a golf course, they really know this stuff. They know their business and how to operate in these areas. So,
and he's been around for decades. And so I just think Gilles is trying to spin a story, and the Premier is trying to spin a story that doesn't really reflect facts. What are you expecting? How does this tie into the budget, Stephen? Just as sort of a last topic.
The budget always going to be a mess. It's not. There's special warrants that actually run government at the end of the day. So I would have mega frustrations with how budgets get built that may be best suited for after the budget comes down. And I can explain those to you. What I will say is, so there's a cabinet shuffle, right? I don't know what day it happened. I guess it happened on Monday after Rob's press conference. So for me, and I think that rightly or wrongly, and you're probably going to disagree with me, I honestly think that Brendan Kern got overlooked 2 times in a row now. And you could say that he's inexperienced, but like, Brandon ran against the leader of the Liberal Party. Brandon ran for the nomination and basically boxed Mark Ledwell led a fronting in there because Mark Ledwell wanted to run.
Come on. He was given a job in the Premier's office to pad his CV.
But either way,
he made calls from the Premier's office before the by-election was called to ensure he won the nomination. And he almost lost the safest seat on PEI.
He had the same number of votes that I had in 2015. So
what was the plurality difference?
Well, that's because the Greens are dead. The Greens carried a lot of the vote.
He almost lost.
All that aside, how could you pass him up? I mean, so you could argue that they put him up to all that, or did that's what, but now they're going to ignore the fact that he was a soldier for them.
I'm enjoying watching Brendan in cabinet, but he was also, when he was working, perhaps for you or in the Premier's office, he pretended that he was a cabinet minister when he talked to people.
So he probably knows how to do it.
Or he enjoys
Listen, I'd say he worked close enough with one of the best cabinet ministers ever on PEI. So I think Brendan Curran
Gilbert Clements? Is that
I think Brendan deserves a shot, but
look, geography, we all know that geography, and frankly, nobody has ever offered a rational explanation why Jen Redmond was dropped in the first place.
Agreed.
I
really like Jen Redmond. I do.
I know what the knock was against her, that she wasn't particularly effective, but she caused zero problems.
Sure.
And she lives in an area, Charlottetown, Stratford, Cornwall, that will decide the next election.
Absolutely.
So that's why Brendan isn't in as well. Geography, I mean, Robin's up in Surrey. He's doing a pretty good job, I think. But we should mention Darlene Compton this week because she's done a really good job. I know a lot of people think that maybe she fed information. There's no way in hell Darlene Compton fed information on this file to anyone. And she's standing up and doing her job and saying what she knows and saying what she doesn't know. And she's doing it in a really effective and professional way.
I really like Darlene. Darlene's a very dear friend of mine. She's an absolute all-star in my heart for sure. So I too think that she did a really good job handling this. I think that she had dealt a terrible blow in this, that she has to answer for things that she had absolutely nothing to do with and knows very little about other than what we all collectively know. So I feel bad for her, but I think she's done a tremendous job.
Stephen Myers, that's probably enough for episode 2 of Myers MacNeill, because life is local.
Yeah.
Thanks, Stephen.
Okay.